Welcome, brave souls. I'm Mr. Sleep Crime, and in tonight's chilling tale, we explore 3 true stories that will keep you awake long after you turn off the lights. These aren't the kind of stories you hear around the campfire, so sit back if you dare. Turn down the lights, pull the blanket a little closer, and prepare yourself for what is about to unfold. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single moment of this. But before we begin, do me a favor, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell, because we'll be bringing you more terrifying tales like this every week. And if you're feeling brave enough, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear which part of the story sent a chill down your spine. Are you ready to face your fears? Because tonight, the terror begins. Let's begin with our first terrifying story, one that will leave you questioning every face you see on your next flight. Story 1, The Stalker Passenger. It was my first real job as a flight attendant with a small airline based out of San Diego, California. I had always dreamed of traveling, of seeing the world from the skies, and this job seemed perfect. The airline mostly handled short flights along the West Coast, flying between cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Portland, and Seattle. It was the kind of job I imagined would be exciting, the kind of job where you meet new people and see new places, but that was before everything changed, before I met Jonathan. The first time I saw him, it seemed like nothing out of the ordinary. He was just another passenger, polite, quiet, and seemingly harmless. A man in his late 30s, a frequent flyer on the same routes I worked. He'd board, sit, smile, say hello, and that was it. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I started noticing him more. He seemed to show up on every single one of my flights. At first, it could have been a coincidence. After all, flights between these cities weren't that numerous. But then it became a little too frequent to be random. I would see him sitting in the same section, looking at me intently, always with a quiet smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. As days passed, the unease began to build. The way he watched me, it wasn't just casual. It was as if he was studying me, observing me in ways that felt wrong. I would smile, nod, but the whole time, something in his gaze felt like it pierced through me. But it wasn't until the flight from San Diego to Seattle that things started getting really strange. On that flight, as I moved through the cabin serving drinks, I caught him doing something that stopped me dead in my tracks. He was taking a picture of me, not of the cabin, not of the sky outside the window, but of me. The phone was pointed directly at me, and when our eyes met, he simply lowered it, gave a small, polite smile, and looked away as if nothing had happened. My stomach churned, but I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he was just an odd guy, or perhaps just an admirer, nothing more. But that didn't explain the repeated encounters. Every time I worked a flight, he seemed to be on it. Every time I moved through the cabin, there he was watching me. A week later, we had an overnight layover in Portland. Exhausted after a long day of flights, I decided to take a walk to a nearby cafe to unwind. As I stepped onto the street, the cold evening air hit me, and I felt a sense of relief in being away from the hustle and bustle of the airport. I didn't expect to see anyone I knew, but as I crossed the street, my heart dropped. There he was, Jonathan, standing under a street lamp, just standing there. I froze in place for a moment, trying to convince myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe he was here for business. Maybe he was just waiting for someone. But then I couldn't shake the feeling. He was waiting for me. I turned quickly, walking toward the cafe with my head down. Inside, I tried to ignore the knot in my stomach, but I kept glancing out the window. Every time I looked, he was there, standing under the same streetlight, just watching me. I tried to focus on my meal, but my appetite vanished. My thoughts raced, and I hurried through dinner, paying and leaving as quickly as I could. Outside, I kept checking behind me, hoping to put as much distance between myself and him as possible. That night, I barely slept. The thought of him being so close, of him finding me in a completely different city, shook me to my core. I didn't tell anyone about it yet. What would I even say? He hadn't threatened me. He hadn't done anything wrong, really. He just stared. And that was what scared me most of all. Story 2, The Midnight Passenger. A few weeks passed. It felt like a sense of normalcy was returning. The flights went on. I didn't see Jonathan, and I tried to move past the unsettling thoughts. But on one late flight from Los Angeles to San Diego, I saw him again. He was sitting in the front row next to the galley. His eyes locked onto me the moment I walked past, and I felt that uncomfortable twinge in my stomach again. This time, it was different. I wasn't just seeing him on my flight. He was making it known he was there. He wanted me to notice him, and I did. As the flight progressed, he didn't stop looking at me. It was almost like he was daring me to confront him, to acknowledge the fact that he was always around, always watching. The whole time, my mind raced with worry. Should I say something? Should I tell someone? But it wasn't until the flight landed that I realized I couldn't ignore him any longer. As passengers filed out, I lingered behind, hoping to avoid him. But of course, he wasn't in a rush. He took his time gathering his things, and as he passed me, he leaned closer and said something that froze my blood. "Have a good night. I'll see you soon." His voice was calm, like it was no big deal, but the words hung in the air like a dark omen. I stood there for what felt like hours, heart racing, trying to figure out what to do. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I needed to report him. I had to. The next day, I gathered the courage to tell my supervisor. Airline security and the local police were notified. But the problem was there was no hard evidence. Jonathan hadn't done anything illegal, nothing that could be proven in a court of law. He hadn't made a direct threat. He hadn't physically harmed me. But that feeling of being hunted, of being watched, it was real. The airline moved me to a different schedule, hoping that would deter him. For a while, it seemed to work. Weeks went by without incident, and I allowed myself to breathe again, thinking it was all just a bad dream. But then one night, everything changed again. After a normal evening flight, I arrived back at my apartment building, exhausted but glad to be home. As I unlocked my door, I noticed a folded note slipped under it. Shaking, I opened it. Inside, in neat handwriting, was a single line that sent my blood running cold. "You shouldn't have told anyone." I stared at the note, my heart thudding in my chest. He knew where I lived. I called the police immediately, but once again, there was nothing they could do. The security footage showed no signs of him. No one was seen entering the building. But the note, how did he get into my apartment? How did he know where I lived? The fear gnawed at me, eating away at my sense of security. I couldn't stay in my apartment anymore. I packed up, moved out, and changed my contact details. It seemed like the only choice, but even then the nightmare didn't end. I could still feel his eyes on me. Every time I turned a corner, every time I heard a knock at my door, I wondered if it was him. I never saw Jonathan again after that, but even now I can't shake the feeling that he's out there, still watching. Sometimes the scariest part isn't the fear you feel, but the fear of what might be lurking in the shadows. What if the person watching you isn't just a stranger? What if there's someone who knows you, someone who's been following you for much longer than you realize? We may never know what happened to Jonathan, but one thing's for sure, his presence will never leave me. Before we continue with the next story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell icon so you never miss another chilling tale. And be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think happened to Jonathan? Was it just obsession or something darker? Have you ever found yourself trapped in a situation so strange, so terrifying, that it leaves you questioning everything around you? What if your job, the place you feel most comfortable, becomes the site of something unexplainable, something that shakes you to your very core? This is what happened to me on one of my late-night flights, a flight I will never forget. I've been a flight attendant for years, but it was this particular evening that changed everything. It was a routine flight, a short hop from Miami to New York City late at night. The plane was mostly empty, a few business travelers here and there, some tired souls heading home after long days. The flight was smooth at first and everything seemed normal until I saw him. I noticed him walking down the aisle toward my section. He wasn't particularly tall or short, and his face was somewhat nondescript. He wore a heavy coat, even though it was summer. But it wasn't just his strange attire that made me uneasy. It was the way he moved, the way his eyes didn't meet mine, but instead stared at the floor as if he was lost, detached from reality. I offered a polite greeting, but he didn't acknowledge me. He simply walked to his seat in the back near the window and sat down without a word. At first, I thought nothing of it. Some people are just quiet. It's a long flight, maybe he was tired. But as the night went on, I began to notice him again. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Every time I passed by him, I saw his eyes fixed on the window, not moving, not blinking. I've seen all kinds of passengers in my years of flying, but this was different. This man had a presence about him, a stillness that made me nervous. He wasn't engaging with anyone, not even looking at the flight attendants as we passed. Something about him felt wrong. As the flight progressed, I began to hear strange things. At first, it was subtle, soft whispers, like someone was talking in their sleep. But then it became clearer, louder. It was like a low mumble, just under the hum of the engines. At first, I thought it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but then I heard it again. And this time, it was unmistakable. It was coming from his seat. I tried to ignore it, to tell myself it was nothing, but the whispers continued, and then it happened. As I walked past the aisle again, I looked down to where he was sitting. His head was tilted back, eyes wide open, staring straight ahead. But he wasn't looking at the window anymore. No, his eyes were locked onto me, but they were not the eyes of a man. They were hollow, dark, almost unnatural. It was like he wasn't seeing me at all, but seeing through me, into something far deeper, something darker. I could feel my heart racing, my breath quickening. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew I needed to get away. I moved quickly, telling myself that I was just tired, that the long hours of flying were getting to me. But something inside me kept saying, "Don't turn your back on him." The flight went on, and I tried to push the strange encounter to the back of my mind. It wasn't until the cabin lights dimmed for the night, and most passengers were asleep, that I noticed something else. I couldn't find him. I walked through the cabin, checking on everyone. The man who had been sitting in seat 32B, the one who had made me feel so uneasy, was no longer there. His seat was empty. I checked again, walked up and down the aisles, peeking into the restrooms, but there was no sign of him. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air. Now I was truly scared. I went to the cockpit, telling the pilots about the situation. They didn't seem concerned, but they agreed to check the security footage once we landed, just to make sure everything was fine. As I stood there, I felt my anxiety rising. What if something had happened? What if he was still on the plane? I walked back to my section, my eyes scanning every row, every seat. But the longer I stood there, the more I began to feel like I was being watched. I turned slowly and glanced toward the back of the plane, and there he was. He was standing at the rear door, staring at me with those same hollow eyes. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there, as if waiting for something. But the most chilling part was that he wasn't standing alone. There was something else behind him, something I couldn't make out at first, something in the shadows just out of sight. It was moving just slightly, like a figure in the dark. I blinked, and when I looked back, the man was gone. I couldn't breathe, my hands were shaking, my mind raced with questions. What was going on? Where had he gone? And what was that thing standing behind him? When we landed, I did everything I could to avoid speaking to the pilots. Just wanted to get off the plane. I was desperate to leave. As soon as the plane came to a stop, I rushed out of my seat and made my way through the cabin, not looking back. Once I reached the terminal, I ran straight to the security office. I told them everything, the whispers, the strange man, his disappearance, the thing behind him, but they just looked at me like I was crazy. "We checked the security footage," they said, but they couldn't find anything unusual. They checked every camera on the plane, every angle, nothing. That's when I realized it wasn't just me. It wasn't just some tired flight attendant with an overactive imagination. Something was wrong. Something had been wrong from the moment I first laid eyes on him. To this day, I can't explain what happened on that flight. The man, the shadows, the whispers. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I still feel that eerie presence, as if he's there just behind me, waiting for me to turn around. What do you think happened to the midnight passenger? Was he just another strange traveler, or was there something far darker at play? If you've had a similar experience, or if you think you know what it might have been, drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your theories. Story 3. The Vanishing Pilot. Imagine being in the one place you should feel the safest, the cockpit of a commercial airplane. It's a place where control is everything, where every button, every gauge, every signal is designed to give you peace of mind. But what if one day that peace is shattered? What if you're the one responsible for guiding thousands of lives safely through the air, only to find yourself in the middle of an unexplainable event so terrifying, so bizarre, that it changes everything you thought you knew about reality. It was supposed to be a normal flight, the type of flight pilots take every day. A routine international route from Los Angeles to London, the kind of journey that runs like clockwork, smooth, predictable. But on this night, something went horribly wrong. I'm Captain Jason Daniels, and I've been flying for over 15 years. Thousands of hours in the air, countless flights, and not a single problem. At least that's what I thought. I was at the helm of a Boeing 737 cruising at 35,000 feet, surrounded by nothing but the deep, dark sky and the occasional flash of distant stars. The weather was calm, clear skies. It was one of those rare, peaceful nights where everything seems perfect. I was joined in the cockpit by my first officer, Lieutenant David West, a rookie with just under 500 hours of flight experience. His hands shook slightly as he performed his routine checks, but that was nothing out of the ordinary. A new guy always gets nervous, especially when flying a transatlantic route for the first time. Everything seemed fine until it wasn't. About halfway through the flight, I noticed something unusual on my radar. A blip, just a small speck, moving erratically, very close to our flight path. I wasn't alarmed at first. There's a lot of air traffic, especially at night, and it's not unusual for planes to cross paths. But this blip, it didn't make sense. It moved too fast, too erratically. I told David to keep an eye on it as I tried to adjust our course, just to avoid any potential collision. But the closer we got, the more it seemed off. The object didn't respond to our radio calls. It didn't show up on any of the nearby radar systems, and the ATC radar seemed completely unaware of it. David and I exchanged worried looks, but I kept my cool. I've dealt with strange things in the air before. Birds, weather, military test flights. But this was something else. The blip started moving toward us. I couldn't believe what was happening. The thing wasn't an aircraft. There was no sound, no trail, no engine. It simply appeared, moving faster than anything I had ever seen. As I glanced at my instruments, they began to flicker. First the radar, then the autopilot, and soon the lights. For a moment, the entire cockpit was plunged into darkness. I slammed my hand down on the emergency switches and the lights came back on, but the blip was gone. In its place, deep, unsettling silence filled the cockpit. David looked pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Did you see that, Captain? What was that?" I didn't answer immediately. I couldn't. What had I just as I was about to radio ATC and report the incident, I heard it, the sound of something moving in the back of the plane. It was a soft tapping at first, the kind of sound you might hear from the cabin crew serving drinks, but there was no crew back there. It was just David and me in the cockpit. The tapping grew louder, more distinct, like someone or something was walking toward the cockpit door, but no one was supposed to be there. I glanced over at David. He was staring at the door, his face frozen in place, his hand trembling on the yoke. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, barely able to keep my voice steady. David nodded slowly, his eyes darting between me and the door. The tapping grew louder. Suddenly the door burst open. I swear to you, when I looked up, I saw someone standing there, but it wasn't one of our passengers. It wasn't anyone from the crew. It was a man in a full pilot's uniform. I was about to ask him what he was doing, but my voice caught in my throat. Something was wrong. His face, there was no expression on it. He just stood there, staring at us with hollow eyes, his lips not moving. He was as still as a statue. The flight attendants, the passengers, none of them had seen this man. But there he was, standing in the doorway. I jumped up and shouted, "Who are you?" And then just like that, he vanished. The cockpit door slammed shut. David and I were both standing, hearts pounding. Neither of us had seen him leave. He simply disappeared. David immediately ran to the cockpit door and locked it. I was too frozen in place, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I knew the plane was in the air, but everything felt wrong. The strange blip, the eerie silence, and now, this man. I pulled up the security cameras, checked the crew schedules, but there was nothing. No record of anyone who could have been in the cockpit. No one had entered the flight deck. At this point, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, something that went far beyond just a glitch in the system or a prank from one of the passengers. The turbulence started soon after. We hit an unexpected patch of rough air, but this was different. The plane wasn't just shaking, it was being pulled, as though something was grabbing it from the outside. I tried to maintain control, but the instruments were starting to malfunction again. The autopilot failed. The lights flickered once more, the turbulence worsened, the plane dipped and swayed like a ship in a storm. And then, silence. I don't know how long we were suspended like that, but the quiet was deafening. There was no more turbulence. The instruments were working again. I looked over at David, who was white as a sheet, staring out the window. In the distance, there was something on the horizon, a light, a beacon, perhaps. I turned the controls and headed toward the light, praying that this was the way home. As we got closer, the light grew brighter. But it wasn't a beacon, it was a mass, a swirling mass of lights. It wasn't just one light, it was many. It looked like something otherworldly, like the very sky itself had been torn open. And then, as we approached, the lights began to fade. I could feel the temperature drop in the cabin. The instruments died again. The blip was back on the radar. I slammed my hand on the radio, trying to reach out, trying to make contact, but it was too late. What do you think happened to Captain Daniels and his first officer? Was it a glitch in the system, a bad dream, or something much more sinister? Could the strange pilot they saw have been real, or something else entirely? Drop your theories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next terrifying story.